Hey, welcome to Starbound. I'm Daniel Pierce, and I'm going to be your narrator today. Nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories. That includes Sunspire Academy and Fravor Interamici. If you'd like to unlock early access and support our new episodes and series, tap join below. Become a Starbound member today. Now, let's get into today's story. The apex nest hung in geosynchronous orbit above verdant echelon like a chrome-plated wasp, all angles and attitude. Verdant echelon was a wild, unpredictable forest moon with real, sometimes lethal, wildlife, and minimal resources. Through the apex nest panoramic observation windows, the forest moon below swirled with clouds that looked deceptively peaceful. But the students knew the truth. Something down there was evolving new and creative ways to eat them. An announcement echoed loudly through the prep bay. Attention students, and welcome. Please feel free to use our training prep accommodations while you wait for the drop. Remember the challenge. Be the last team to survive for 72 hours on verdant echelon. This is a tournament designed to test your courage, intelligence, survival, and sabotage skills. Please remember that although some wildlife is lethal, students are not allowed to commit murder or acts of extreme violence against each other. Well, that's comforting. Commander Capo of the Olandari stood at perfect attention, his sand-colored skin catching the harsh station lights. His secondary eyelids flicked sideways in a rhythmic pattern that his species used for meditation before battle, or before standardized test. The Olandari didn't really distinguish between the two. Across the prep bay, Severo of the Varkara watched this display with the kind of smirk that had been getting his species punched in their large, light-absorbing eyes for millennia. His movements were liquid shadow as he glided between the other teams, cataloging weaknesses like a sommelier sampling wines. The Spindlerets have brought mining charges, Severo murmured to his partner. The Atari are still debating whether their base should face magnetic north or true south. And the Olandari? He paused, savoring the moment. The Olandari are shaping a knife they're not allowed to use on anyone. What about the new species? His partner asked. Severo turned his attention to the far corner, where humanity's first representatives to the Galactic Scholastic Survival Invitational had just arrived. His smirk widened into something that would have been a grin if the Valkara had enough teeth to make it work. 3 humans stumbled through the doors like they'd gotten lost on the way to a camping trip. Their gear was a catastrophe of mismatched equipment that looked like it had been assembled by raiding a dozen different outdoor stores during a blackout. The one in front, Riley Madison, according to the roster, clutched a physical book with duct tape holding the spine together. Someone had scrawled, "If found, I'm probably dead. Loot my corpse," across the cover in permanent marker. The second human, Jack Tadeo, had a roll of duct tape hanging from his belt like a gunslinger's holster. He examined the prep base ceiling with the intense focus of someone calculating load-bearing structures or possibly just spacing out. The third, Missy Silver, was the only one who seemed to have brought actual technology. A datapad held together with various patches, tape, and possibly gum. "Oh, they sent us primitives," Severo announced, loud enough for the room to hear. "This will be over by first sunset." Riley looked up from her book, meeting his black eyes with the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had survived public school lunch lines. "Hey, Jack!" she called without breaking eye contact. "He thinks we're primitives." "Ha! Neat," Jack replied, still studying the ceiling. "Did you tell him about the time you built a working catapult?" Riley wrinkled her nose in annoyance. "That was supposed to be a trebuchet!" Jack smirked and rolled his eyes. Same difference." Riley put her hands in her hips. "It is not! One's a glorified slingshot, the other is the superior siege engine. It's not even close!" "Still launched that flaming pumpkin 3 blocks." Riley grinned proudly. Fair point." She clapped her hands together and rubbed them, not unlike a comically evil villain. "I plan on building a treehouse during this challenge." Missy glanced up from her datapad. A bit ambitious, don't you think? Riley shrugged.
What's wrong with showing off a little?
The Spindle-Red siblings, Grit and Helsa, stopped punching their equipment bags to watch this exchange. In their culture, mentioning flaming projectiles was considered either a marriage proposal or a declaration of war, and they weren't sure which way the humans meant it. A chime echoed through the bay. "Attention, competitors!" The Station 6 announced with the forced cheer of someone who had been programmed to find violent competition delightful. "Please proceed to your designated drop pods. Planetary insertion begins in 15 minutes. Planetary insertion? Jack muttered. Why do they have to make it sound so medical?
Because we're going to shoot you at a planet and hope the parachutes work doesn't test well with parents.
As the teams filed towards their pods, Coach Briggs's voice crackled over the human team's earpieces. He sounded like he'd already started his post-competition bourbon, which was impressive considering it was barely noon. All right, listen up, you walking liability lawsuits. I've got 3 pieces of advice. 1, don't die in the first hour. The paperwork is a nightmare. 2, remember that thing we talked about with the Geneva Convention? Missy supplied helpfully. That's the one. It doesn't apply here, but let's pretend it does. And 3, if you do die, try to make it funny. I've got money on you lasting at least 6 hours.
Only 6?
Riley asked, genuinely offended. I'm being optimistic. The betting pool has you down for 3. The confidence is overwhelming, Coach, Jack called out as they climbed into their pod. We promise to die with honor, or at least in a really funny way. That's all I ask. The drop pods were designed by someone who thought comfort was a character flaw. The Olandari began a slow chant. The Yatari pulled up a holographic display showing optimal landing vectors. The Valkara simply closed their eyes and went still. In the human pod, Jack had started humming Highway to Hell, off-key, while Riley and Missy played rock, paper, scissors for who got the seat that didn't smell like industrial cleaner. 20 creds say the Spindle-Reds try to punch a tree within the first 5 minutes, Missy offered.
You're on, Riley replied. My money's on 3 minutes.
The pods detached with a sensation like being sneezed out of a giant's nose. Through the small porthole, Verdant Echelon rushed up to meet them, a green-brown marble wrapped in clouds that flickered with bioluminescent lighting. So, Jack said suddenly, his humming cut short by a grin that suggested incoming chaos. I read the whole manual last night. Want to know the fun parts? Riley's eyes narrowed. You read the entire survival manual and you're just now sharing? I figured high-stress situations build character. Plus, it's funnier this way. He cleared his throat dramatically. Also, there's something called a Grathhound. 6 legs, saber teeth, disposition of hangry Wolverine crossed with a bad divorce. Fantastic. The pod hit atmosphere with a bone-rattling shudder. Through the chaos of re-entry, they could hear Coach Briggs' final message cutting through the static. Remember, kids, if you can't be good, be lucky. If you can't be lucky, be smart. And if you can't be smart, well, that's why we have insurance waivers. The ground rushed up to meet them with enthusiasm. They hit dirt, or what passed for dirt, on a moon where even the soil had trust issues, with an impact that rattled teeth and rearranged internal organs. Everyone alive? Riley called, already unbuckling her restraints. Define alive, Jack groaned, hanging upside down from his harness. Conscious and capable of sarcasm. And yeah, I guess, Jack wheezed. Missy had somehow managed to land right side up and was already pulling up terrain scans on her jury-rigged datapad. Okay, we got dense forest in every direction, water source approximately 200 meters northeast, and oh, that's interesting. Good interesting, or we're about to die interesting? Riley asked, hefting her gear back. There's a cluster of 3 massive trees about 50 meters that way, growing in an almost perfect triangle, natural fortification. Dibs on the treehouse spot, Jack said, finally extricating himself from his harness with all the grace of a newborn giraffe. Riley paused in her gear sorting.
3 trees? Perfect triangle? If we don't build a treehouse, we're insulting the universe's obvious suggestion.
They emerged from the pod into a forest that was a riot of wrong colors. Purple bark that shifted to brown when you weren't looking directly at it, leaves that rustled without any wind, and a sweet floral scent that definitely meant something wanted to digest them. Around them, the forest already rang with the sounds of the other teams making landfall. To the east, rhythmic chanting echoed through the trees. It sounds like the Yolandari, Jack noted, cocking his head. Remember their pre-brief? They won't build anything without asking the ground for permission first. From the north came raised voices in what sounded like parliamentary procedure.
And that'll be the Yutari debating optimal feng shui,
Missy added.
They've mentioned their consensus-based decision-making. This could take hours.
A distant crash-boom-crash made them all turn west. Riley checked her watch.
2 minutes, 43 seconds. You win. The Spindlerets found a tree to punch.
They found the tree cluster exactly where Missy's scan had indicated. Up close, the trunks were even more impressive. Each one thick as a subway car, rising into a canopy so dense it created its own microclimate. The air underneath felt 10 degrees cooler and smelled of ancient wood and possibilities.
Okay,
Riley said, circling the natural fortification with the manic energy of someone who had spent too many summers turning couch cushions into architectural masterpieces.
This could work.
Could work? Jack was already pulling out rope and examining the lowest branches.
This is perfect. We get elevation, natural defense, and...
He paused, sniffing the air.
Is it just me, or does something smell like bacon? That's the murder moss,
Missy said without looking up from her datapad.
It releases appetizing scents to attract prey, then dissolves them slowly.
Murder moss, right. Adding that to the list of things not to touch. Right after anything that glows and anything that looks too friendly. Riley had pulled out her duct tape manual and was sketching directly onto its pages with the focused intensity of a master planning a heist.
Jack, think you can get a line up there to that branch cluster?
Please. I once free climbed a cell tower to retrieve a frisbee.
Why was there a frisbee on a... Never mind. Missy, inventory our tools. I want to know exactly what we're working with.
What they were working with, it turned out, was a combination of standard issue survival gear and whatever the humans had managed to smuggle past the equipment check. The standard kit included laser saws, rivet guns, and emergency shelter panels. The smuggled items included 3 rolls of duct tape, a collection of carabiners that Jack swore were multi-purpose, and a harmonica that no one remembered packing.
All right,
Riley announced, her sketch complete.
Here's what we're building.
She showed them the manual. Where once there had been a guide to identify edible berries, there was now a detailed blueprint for what could only be described as a fortress masquerading as a treehouse.
3 levels?
Missy asked, impressed despite herself.
Main platform here, storage and workshop below, observation post above. We use the natural fork in the branches for the main support. Run guide wires between the trees for stability, and this is the clever bit. We build the whole thing to flex with the trees instead of fighting them.
That's, Jack studied the blueprint,
actually brilliant. How long did you think? 3 hours,
Riley said.
Maybe less if we don't stop for lunch.
3 hours?
Missy looked skeptical.
I can still hear the Yolandari chanting. They haven't even started building yet.
Exactly. So, let's get to work.
The next 3 hours would have made a time-lapse video go viral across many star systems. Jack scaled the first tree, like gravity was a suggestion he had politely declined. The rope sailed over the target branch on the first throw, and within minutes, they had a basic pulley system that would have made a physics teacher weep with joy. Riley managed the cuts with the tactical awareness of someone who had learned carpentry from YouTube videos.
The laser saw hummed through alien wood that was harder than steel but somehow still organic, leaving edges so smooth they caught the light like mirrors. Missy turned out to have a hidden talent for systems integration. While the others handled the main construction, she rigged a supply lift using repurposed shelter panel motors and enough cable to make OSHA have nightmares.
How's that bracket holding?
Riley called up to Jack, who balanced on a beam 40 feet off the ground with the casual confidence of someone who had been banned from multiple jungle gyms.
Solid as my aunt's fruitcake and twice likely to survive nuclear war.
He called back, already reaching for the next section.
Ready when you are.
They worked like they'd been doing this all their lives, which, in a way, they had. Every human child who'd ever built a fort, rigged a rope swing, or figured out how to get onto the roof without their parents noticing had been training for this moment. The main platform came together with surprising speed. They used the shelter panels for flooring, but reinforced everything with lashing techniques that would have made Eagle Scouts jealous and enough duct tape to concern shareholders.
Windbreak on the north side,
Riley ordered, not looking up from where she was securing a support beam.
Weather comes from that direction.
How do you know that? Missy asked. Moss growth patterns. Also, Jack already got slapped in the face by branches from that direction twice. 3 times, Jack corrected, spitting out a leaf that tasted like regret. But who's counting? The second level took shape, then the beginnings of the third. They worked mostly in silence now, communicating in the half-telepathic way of people who had learned to trust each other's competence through shared detention sentences. As the third hour drew to a close, the structure was not just complete, but somehow actually impressive. It wasn't pretty, aesthetics were for people who didn't have grathhounds to worry about, but it was solid, practical, and 40 feet off the ground where most things with teeth couldn't reach.
Last piece,
Riley announced, holding up a salvaged piece of podhole they'd fashioned to a crude chimney.
Jack,
on it. He scrambled up the roof with the agility of someone who had spent formative years avoiding mall security, securing the chimney with the last of their rivets and a prayer to whatever deity watched over teenage hubris. They stood on their main platform, surveying their domain. The forest stretched out below them, dappled with afternoon sunlight and filtered through leaves the color of old jade and broken promises. In the distance, smoke finally rose from what must be the Olandari camp. From the north, the Yatari voices had reached the kind of volume that suggested someone had brought up a touchy subject. "So," Jack said, pulling out the harmonica no one remembered packing, "what do we call it?" Riley grinned. "I was thinking Treehouse Prime. Spelled with a AUS? Obviously, we're not barbarians." Missy was already elbow-deep in their proximity sensors, reprogramming them with the kind of focus usually reserved for defusing bombs or speedrunning video games.
You know, they're going to come for us, right? Everyone always goes after the high ground.
"Let them come," Riley said, testing the railing with casual confidence. "We've got elevation, solid slat lines, and Jack found a beehive we can drop on people." "It's not actually bees," Jack clarified, "but whatever's in there sounds really angry and has too many wings." A drone buzzed overhead, its camera eye focusing on their construction. On the orbital station, adults who had spent their careers studying interspecies competition were having very quiet panic attacks into their beverages. The humans didn't notice. They were too busy rigging what Missy insisted on calling Phase 2.
"In that toilet?"
Jack asked, watching Riley secure a portable waste unit to the corner of their platform.
"It's a statement,"
she replied.
"What kind of statement?" "That we're civilized enough to not poop in the woods like animals."
Paused.
"Also, it'll make great bait later."
"Bait for what?" Riley's grin would have worried anyone who knew her well.
"You'll see."
As dusk began to paint the sky in shades of amber and bruised purple, smoke curled from their makeshift chimney. They'd found something that was probably safe to burn. It smelled like pine and bad decisions, but hadn't killed them yet. In the distance, something howled. It was the kind of howl that spoke of too many teeth and a fundamental disagreement with the concept of vegetarianism.
"Grathhounds?"
Missy guessed.
"Sounds like it."
Riley pulled out Sounds like it.
Riley pulled out her manual, now annotated with survival notes, architectural diagrams, and what appeared to be a recipe for improvised explosive devices.
Says here they hunt in packs of 6 to 12.
Of course they do, Jack sighed, because why would alien predators make our lives easy?
Where's the fun in easy?
Riley asked, already sketching trap designs in the margins with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for planning senior pranks. Below them, the forest shifted from day mode to night mode, which on verdant echelon meant everything got about 30% more likely to kill you and 100% more likely to glow. The bioluminescent fungi cast eerie blue-green light that made the shadows dance like drunken ghosts.
First watch?
Missy asked, though they all knew sleep was unlikely when the trees themselves seemed to be breathing.
I'll take it,
Riley volunteered.
I want to see if my proximity sensor modifications work.
What modifications? Jack asked warily.
Remember that recording of Coach Briggs yelling at us for the fireworks incident?
Yeah?
I may have sampled the best parts.
As if on cue, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the forest. But it wasn't from any alien predator.
What the hell kind of moron lights fireworks and a...
The recording cut off abruptly. In the distance, they could hear confused alien voices and what sounded like someone falling into a bush full of opinions.
Motion sensors work,
Missy noted with satisfaction. The first night on Verdant Echelon was beginning, and xenobiologists were updating their files on human beings. The section on mostly harmless was being crossed out and replaced with creatively vindictive when provided with duct tape. In Treehouse Prime, the humans made popcorn and settled in for the show. The Grathhounds came with the full dark, moving through the forest like hunger given form and far too many legs. Their howls were a harmony of evolutionary bad decisions, each note calibrated to make prey freeze in terror, just long enough to become dinner. From the safety of Treehouse Prime, the humans watched the light show below. Blaster fire lit up the night in staccato bursts. Warning shots only, per competition rules, but the Grathhounds didn't seem to appreciate the distinction.
10 creds says the Spindlerets tried to wrestle one.
Jack offered, munching on something that might have been popcorn if popcorn could be made from local tree bark and optimism.
No bet,
Riley replied, watching through her salvage binoculars.
Look, Grit's already rolling up his sleeves.
A roar of frustration echoed from the Spindleret camp, followed by the distinctive sound of someone being thrown into a tree by something with more legs than patience. The Grathhounds, apparently deciding there was easier prey elsewhere, melted back into the shadows with the fluid grace of nightmares learning to walk.
They're coming this way,
Missy observed, tracking movement on her datapad. The pack circled the base of their trees, 6 shapes of condensed malevolence, sniffing at the bark. The smell hit the humans even 40 feet up, ozone and musk and something like burned copper. One of the younger Grathhounds tried to climb, got about 10 feet up, and then seemed to remember that it had evolved for running, not climbing. It slid back down with a sound like someone losing an argument with gravity and dignity simultaneously.
Huh?
Riley said.
The manual was right. They can't climb for shit.
Language, Jack said. But yeah, they climb like my Uncle Gary after his 3rd beer. The pack circled a few more times, made some threatening noises that lost impact when one of them tripped over its own feet, and eventually wandered off to terrorize someone with ground-level accommodations.
Well, that was anticlimactic,
Missy said.
Night's still young,
Riley pointed out.
Who wants s'mores?
They didn't have marshmallows, chocolate, or graham crackers, but they did have emergency rations that could be charred over a fire and sandwiched between 2 bark wafers, which was close enough. The screaming started around midnight. Not human screaming, that would have been against the rules. This was the kind of screaming plants did when they were stressed, which on Verdant Echelon meant pretty much constantly. The Atari camp had apparently chosen to build near a grove of anxiety ferns.
Those poor bastards,
Jack said with genuine sympathy.
Imagine trying to sleep while the plants are having a panic attack. By morning, the forest had settled into a rhythm of ordinary menace. The humans climbed down from their fortress to perform the sacred ritual of morning bathroom breaks and breakfast acquisition. They found Lycos, a Yatari scout, lying by a stream looking like someone had painted him in shades of pain. His elongated fingers clutched at his side, where an angry red welt was spreading up to his torso like biological graffiti.
Neurowasp,
He gasped.
the swelling, it's moving toward my heart.
His teammate, Varen, frantically scrolled through their medical database with the desperation of someone Googling symptoms at 3 a.m.
It says here the antivenom requires 3 ingredients we don't have, and a centrifuge we definitely don't have.
Riley knelt beside the injured Yatari, studying the wound with the kind of focused attention usually reserved for defusing a bomb or choosing the perfect comeback.
Jack,
She said calmly.
find me something that looks like poison ivy and some broadleaf plantain.
On it. He vanished into the underbrush like a caffeinated ferret.
What are you doing?
Varen asked.
Those aren't in the medical database.
Your medical database doesn't have 4 billion years of Earth evolution trying to murder us in creative ways, Riley replied. We got good at improvising. Jack returned with an armload of plants, half of which were probably toxic. Riley sorted through them with quick efficiency, discarding most before settling on 2 specimens that looked like they'd been designed by committee. She mashed them together with the handle of her multi-tool, creating a paste that smelled like lawn clippings and poor decisions. This is either going to help or make things much worse, she announced cheerfully, spreading the paste over the wound.
Those odds are terrible,
Varen protested. 50-50's better than 0, Jack pointed out. It's basically Earth medicine in a nutshell. Half our medicine breakthroughs started with, I wonder what happens if I eat this. The effect was almost immediate. The spreading redness stopped, reversed, and began to fade. Lycos's breathing eased from dying dramatically to mild discomfort. The effect was almost immediate. The spreading redness stopped, reversed, and began to fade. Lycos's breathing eased from dying dramatically to mild discomfort.
How?
He whispered. Earth logic, Riley explained. Whatever tries to kill you usually grows near something that can save you. It's like nature's really twisted way of teaching us pharmacology. Also spite. Never underestimate medicinal spite. The 2 Yatari exchanged looks that suggested they were reevaluating several fundamental assumptions about the universe and their place in it.
Thank you,
Varen said formally.
we are in your debt.
Nah, Jack waved it off. Just remember us when you're winning. We're the nice ones who built the treehouse and only psychologically scar our enemies. They left the Yatari to the recovery and headed back to Treehouse Prime, where Missy had been busy turning their fortress into something out of a supervillain's fever dream if that supervillain shopped exclusively at hardware stores.
Okay,
She said, gesturing at her improvements with the pride of a mad scientist revealing their monster.
proximity sensors are now programmed with different audio clips, ranging from Screaming Goat to Coach Briggs's greatest hits. I've rigged the perimeter with noisemakers made from the ration tins. They sound like angry ghosts when the wind hits them. And this
She held up what looked like a paint grenade.
is filled with bioluminescent fungi spores mixed with what I'm pretty sure is the alien equivalent of poison ivy.
You're terrifying, Riley said with genuine admiration. What do we call it?
Glow Juice Mark I, patent pending.
They spent the morning turning defense into an art form that would have made Sun Tzu weep with either joy or horror. Jack carved trail markers in multiple alien scripts, all cheerfully directing travelers toward fresh water. That was actually a sulfurous swamp that smelled like eggs and regret. Riley worked on what she called the panic platform, a false floor that would dump anyone who stepped on it into a net full of those screaming ferns they discovered. By afternoon, they had their first customers. Severo and his Valkara partner approached with the kind of silence that made cats look clumsy and ninjas look like they were trying too hard. They had been watching the humans for hours, cataloging their routines. noting the obvious defenses. The primitives had been clever, but cleverness had limits. They disabled the first tripwire with contemptuous ease. The second was clearly a decoy. Nobody would be stupid enough to put two real traps that close together. Severo's partner spotted the pressure plate and pointed. Amateur work, really. They stepped around it with the fluid grace of shadows judging a dance competition. The real trigger was 3 feet past the obvious one, hidden under a layer of leaves that had been painstakingly glued in place with tree sap and determination. The forest erupted in neon green.
What the?
Severo's rarely used voice cracked like a teenager's as the glow juice pods detonated around them. The bioluminescent slurry coated both Vakara from head to toe, turning them into walking, glowing beacons visible from orbit. Worse, the poison ivy component began its work immediately.
I can see my bones.
His partner whispered in horror, looking at his glowing hands.
Run!
Severo hissed, but stealth was impossible when you lit up like a rave gone wrong and itched like you rolled in fiberglass insulation. They crashed through the underbrush, leaving a trail of luminescent handprints and cursing in many languages, including 3 they'd just invented. From the treehouse, Jack watched their retreat through binoculars.
Think we should tell them the glow fades in about 6 hours? And ruin the surprise?
Riley said.
Besides, the itching stops after 2. They'll figure it out. Eventually.
The Olandari came at dawn 2 days later, convinced they'd found a weakness. Commander Capo had noticed the covered trench directly beneath the treehouse, an obvious structural vulnerability that the primitives had tried to hide. No doubt it led to their water source or food storage.
Classic tactical error, he told his squad. They've created a sheltered path for us to exploit.
They moved in perfect formation, shields locked, advancing down the trench with military expertise that would have been impressive if it wasn't about to be hilarious. Capo felt the tripwire snap against his ankle and had just enough time to think this was too easy before the world became significantly more disgusting. The container overhead, clearly labeled "Human Waste Only, Do Not Drink," in multiple languages, including helpful pictographs, tilted on its axis. Gallons of collected refuse poured down on the proud Olandari warriors with the inevitability of karma coming home to roost.
You have been dishonored!
Jack's voice boomed from above.
By our scat!
Jack began scatting in the vocal improvisation way, with a dignity that would have been admirable if he hadn't been dripping with human waste. Capo raised his fist to the treehouse.
Scum!
He said with quiet intensity.
You have made an enemy this day.
You started it!
Riley called down.
Yes, and now we'll finish it.
They retreated. Within hours, every team in the competition knew about the incident. The humans were no longer those primitives. They were the foul ones. The Spindlerets, not to be outdone by their rivals' failure, decided on an approach that had served their species well for millennia. Overwhelming brute force.
No tricks, Grit announced to his sister. No sneaking. We charge, we smash, we take their base.
Simple, Helsa agreed.
Like us.
They came up the main trail like walking avalanches, all muscle and momentum, and the kind of confidence that comes from evolving on a world where gravity was a personal trainer. Riley watched them approach and calmly gave the signal.
You know,
she said conversationally as Jack and Missy got into position,
on Earth, we have this game called Donkey Kong. Is this really the time for gaming history?
Missy asked, kicking away the first chalk.
I'm just saying, rolling barrels downhill at enemies is a classic for a reason.
But they didn't have barrels, they had logs, and the logs thundered down the slope with a rumbling that shook leaves from the trees and made small animals reconsider their life choices. They'd positioned them perfectly, not in neat rows, but at angles, so they bounced unpredictably off rocks and roots like physics was having a temper tantrum. Grit saw the first log coming and laughed.
We simply catch.
The log hit a bump, launched 6 feet into the air, and caught him in the chest. He went down hard enough to leave a splinterette-shaped crater. Helsa dove left, rolled right, then had to jump as 2 logs converged on her position like they'd been planning it. For beings from a high-gravity world, the spindlerettes could move when motivated. They danced through the log-avalanche like contestants on the universe's deadliest game show.
Is that all you...
Helsa began as the second wave of logs came down. The assault lasted 30 seconds. When it was over, the spindlerettes were physically unharmed but psychologically rattled. They retreated down the hill, Grit muttering about
Primitive gravity weapons and dishonorable trees.
From the observation deck of the Apex Nest, the competition judges watched the footage in stunned silence. The Gauntlet had seen many things over its centuries of operation: brilliant tactics, cunning strategies, displays of species-specific superiority. It had never seen anyone weaponize a toilet before.
They're not even using their advanced equipment properly,
Judge Kritek observed, his crystalline form flickering with what might have been amusement.
Half their defenses are held together with adhesive strips.
Duct tape, Judge Williams corrected. She was the lone human on the panel, brought in to provide cultural context. She was trying very hard not to look proud. It's kind of our thing.
They've taken more sabotage points in 3 days than most teams manage in the entire competition,
Judge Varlon noted.
and they haven't thrown a single punch.
Psychological warfare, Williams explained. Why break their bodies when you can break their spirits? The Olandari are calling them the Foul Ones. The Valkara won't go within 50 meters of their perimeter. The Spindlerets flinch when they hear logs rolling. Judge Kritak's form brightened, definitely amusement.
Double the point values for the final challenge. I want to see what these humans do when everyone comes for them at once.
Down on the verdant echelon, unaware their point multiplier had just been increased, the humans were sharing their dinner with unexpected guests. The Atari had approached under a banner of truce, actually a white shirt tied to a stick, but the intent was clear. Lycos walked without any sign of his earlier injury, and Varen carried a basket of fruits they'd identified as safe for human consumption.
We've come to propose an alliance,
Lydia, their team leader, announced with the gravity of someone delivering a state address. Cool, Jack said around a mouthful of roasted something or other. You guys want some murder moss? It's pretty good if you char it enough. The Atari exchanged glances.
You're eating the carnivorous moss.
Turns out it only eats you if you're stationary. Keep moving over the fire and it just tastes like spicy lettuce with anger issues.
That's
Lydia paused, visibly recalibrating.
actually quite clever.
They settled around the fire, sharing food and gradually relaxing. The Atari, it turned out, had a gift for finding edible plants, but struggled with base construction. Their shelter was a masterwork of theoretical engineering that fell apart every time the wind changed direction.
It's the wood,
Varen explained mournfully.
It refuses to conform to our calculations. That's because you're fighting it,
Riley said.
Wood wants to bend. You gotta work with it, not against it. But the equations...
Forget the equations, Jack interrupted cheerfully. Sometimes you just gotta eyeball it and hope. That's how we built most of human civilization. That and spite.
We stand together,
Lydia said formally.
or fall hilariously.
Riley added.
But yeah, together.
As the Atari headed back to their camp with construction advice and a jar of charred murder moss, Missy pulled up the competition stats on her datapad.
Guys,
She said slowly.
look at this.
The scoreboard showed Earth in first place by a margin that shouldn't have been possible. Their base defense score was off the charts, Their sabotage points had broken previous records, and someone had created entirely new categories just for them: psychological warfare, creative use of biological waste, and nonviolent terror tactics.
Huh,
Riley said.
think they're mad about the poop thing?
Only one way to find out, Jack grinned, pulling out another roll of duct tape. What else can we weaponize? They spent the rest of the night planning, unaware that in orbit, the judges were already rewriting the rules for next year's competition. The no toilet-based weapons clause was underlined 3 times. The announcement came at dawn, broadcast directly into every competitor's comlink, with the cheery sadism of morning people everywhere. "Attention, surviving teams," the 6 practically chirped. "Congratulations on reaching the final challenge. The raid begins now." Riley sat up in her hammock, nearly braining herself on a support beam.
Did that thing just air quote surviving?
"Team Earth," the announcement continued, developing what sounded suspiciously like glee. "As current leaders, you have been designated as the primary objective. A data chip has been assigned to your position. Any team that successfully retrieves it wins the entire competition. All sabotage points are now worth double. Violence is still prohibited, but creative interpretation of violence is encouraged." "Well," Jack said, already checking their defenses, "we're absolutely fucked."
Language,
Missy muttered automatically, then added,
"But yeah, we're definitely fucked."
Riley was already in planning mode, her hair sticking up at angles that defied several laws of physics and at least one theory about geometry. "Okay, they'll come at us from multiple directions. The Velkara will try stealth again because they're predictable like that. The Alandari will want revenge for the whole dishonor thing, and the Spindlerets—" A roar echoed from the forest that sounded like someone had crossed a bear with a jet engine and given it anger management issues. "The Spindlerets are already moving," she finished. "Right. Missy, how many glow juice bombs do we have left?"
16 plus that experimental one might explode.
"Perfect. Jack, I need you to build more log traps. Build more everything. If it can fall, roll, or make noise, I want it ready to ruin somebody's day." They were interrupted by movement at the base of their trees. But instead of an attack, they saw Lydia and the Utari approaching with their hands visible and empty. The universal gesture for "please don't drop anything disgusting on us."
We request formal alliance.
Lydia called up.
Our analysis suggests mutual benefit. Your analysis suggests you don't want to fight us.
Riley translated.
That too?
5 minutes later, the Utari were in the treehouse, their calm demeanor a stark contrast to the controlled chaos of human defensive preparation.
"Your plan?"
Lydia asked, watching Jack rig what appeared to be a catapult made of underwear elastic and hope.
"Make them regret everything," Riley said simply. "You?"
"We were thinking more along the lines of strategic defense and careful resource management."
"Boring, but practical. I like it. You guys handle logistics. We'll handle the crazy."
"Define crazy."
Missy held up a jar of something that glowed ominously and seemed to be trying to escape.
"This is murder moss paste mixed with glow juice and what I think might be alien pepper spray. I call it regret sauce."
The Utari took a collective step back.
"Yeah,"
Riley nodded approvingly.
"that's the right reaction. Now, let's talk strategy."
By the time the sun was fully up, Treehouse Prime had transformed from a clever shelter into something that would have made medieval siege engineers weep with envy and modern safety inspectors quit on the spot. The Utari's systematic approach, combined with human chaos, had created a defense system that was equal parts brilliant and insane.
"Pressure plates here, here, and here,"
Varen explained, marking positions on their tactical display.
"The humans have rigged them to deploy, what did you call them?"
"Glitter bombs," Jack supplied. "Well, fungal spore bombs, but same principle. Impossible to get off, mildly toxic, and deeply embarrassing."
The false paths are complete," another Utari reported. "All roads now lead to—"
"The pit of philosophical despair,"
Riley interrupted. I wanted to call it the shame hole, but we voted. The pit in question was a natural depression they'd enhanced with liberal amounts of slippery moss and those screaming ferns. Anyone who fell in would be physically unharmed but psychologically scarred by plants having panic attacks at them while they tried to climb out of the nature's most judgmental hole. And if they get past all that? Lydia asked. Riley's grin would have worried anyone who'd known her since her let's build a zip line off the roof phase. Then they get to meet Jason. Jason? She pointed to the toilet, still mounted prominently in the corner of their main platform. Jason's our special boy. Riley grinned maliciously. The first probe came from the Volcara. Severo had spent 2 days planning this approach, accounting for every trap he had observed, every pattern in the human defenses. He was still faintly luminescent from his last encounter, which his partner had started calling the glowing. He moved like smoke through the forest, if smoke was slightly green and incredibly bitter about it. His partner flanked wide, creating a distraction with thrown rocks and rustling bushes. Severo reached the base of the leftmost tree undetected. The humans had wrapped it in what looked like aluminum foil, probably some primitive detection system. He smirked, as if that would stop a Volcara operative trained in 8 forms of infiltration. He began to climb, using the blind spots he had mapped. The tree itself screamed, a sound like someone running nails down the universe's largest chalkboard, while a violin had a nervous breakdown. Severo lost his grip, fell 10 feet, and landed in what he thought was a pile of soft leaves. The leaves were covering a net made of those horrible screaming ferns. Ah! Went the ferns. Ah! Went Severo, his Volcara composure shattering like cheap glass. Ah! Went his partner, who tried to help and triggered a secondary net. From the treehouse, Jack watched through binoculars. The screaming trees were genius, he told Riley. Just had to find the frequency that makes them panic. Turns out it's the same as my neighbor's bagpipe practice. The Volcara retreated, their stealth compromised by the ferns clinging to their suits and screaming intermittently like car alarms with anxiety disorders. Next came the Olandari, and they came in force. Capo had spent 3 days planning this. His warriors approached in a classic shield wall formation, their feet finding purchase on paths they had scouted, their discipline absolute, despite the lingering trauma of what they now called the dishonoring. They'd learned from that incident. They checked above constantly, shields ready to deflect any falling surprises. Steady advance, Capo ordered. Watchful. The ground wasn't supposed to be bouncy. The pressure plate triggered, but instead of a trap, it activated what Missy had dubbed the Bounce House of Doom. The entire path had been underlaid with elastic materials scavenged from emergency shelters. The advancing Olandari suddenly found themselves on terrain that had the consistency of a trampoline having an identity crisis. Maintain formation! Capo shouted, even as the warriors bounced off each other like militant ping-pong balls. That's when the regret sauce balloons started falling. They burst on shields, on armor, on exposed skin of warriors who had trained for every form of combat, except being attacked by weaponized condiments. The mixture of murder moss and fungal spores created an instant reaction. Not painful, but maddeningly itchy in places armor didn't cover and dignity couldn't scratch. Don't break formation! Capo commanded, his own skin developing what looked like the universe's worst case of hives. Push through! They pushed. They bounced. They discovered that disciplined formation fighting was significantly harder when the ground had opinions about your footwork and your skin was staging a revolution. The final straw came when Private Kellen, youngest of the unit, bounced too high and hit the tripwire for the Glitter Bomb Deluxe. The explosion of bioluminescent spores mixed with what appeared to be craft glitter turned the proud Olandari warriors into a disco ball's fever dream. Retreat! Capo finally ordered, his dignity buried under layers of glitter and regret. But with honor! He added, which was difficult when you were bouncing away like a sparkly kangaroo. Should we tell them the itching stops in an hour? Varen asked, watching the Olandari flee. Let's give it 2. Riley decided.
Character building.
The Spindlerets, watching their rivals fail spectacularly, decided on a different approach. Overwhelming force, but smarter.
We go together,
Grit announced.
all teams. Crush the humans with numbers.
It was the scenario Riley had feared most, coordinated between the rival teams. Even the Yatari Alliance, they couldn't hold off everyone at once.
They're massing a final push.
Lycos reported from his observation post.
All three teams. The Volcara are scouting, the Alundari are forming up despite the glitter situation, and the Spindlerets brought logs.
They brought what now? Jack asked.
Logs. I think they're planning to use them as battering rams.
Riley paused.
That's actually pretty smart. Damn, they're learning.
The final assault came at what the humans had started calling golden hour, the perfect time when the light made everything look epic and also harder to see. The Velkar provided intelligence, marking safe paths with the bitter determination of people who had been outpranked. The Olandari advanced with their shields locked, bouncing be damned. The Spindlerets charged with logs held high, ready to ram the trees themselves if necessary.
This is it,
Riley announced.
Everyone to defensive positions. Remember the plan.
The plan where we probably lose? Jack asked, prepping the last of their traps.
The plan where we lose with style,
she corrected. The battle was chaos incarnate. Glow juice flew in graceful arcs that ended in profanity. Logs rolled with the inevitability of physics having opinions. The Olandari learned that their shields were great for blocking things. from above, but less helpful against Missy's patented ankle-biter mines, small packets of itching powder that exploded at shin height. The Spindlerets actually made it to the trees, their logs slamming into the trunks with impacts that shook the entire structure. For a moment, it looked like brute force might actually win. Then Severo made his move. While everyone was focused on the ground assault, the Volcora leader had circled wide and scaled a neighboring tree. A zip line, his own, not one of the human traps, carried him across the gap. He landed on the roof of Treehouse Prime with perfect silence, which was somewhat undermined by his faint green glow. The structure was empty. The humans were all defending the lower levels. He ghosted through the defenses, noted the actually clever false floors, avoided the obvious traps. His training kicked in, analyzing each step for deception. There, in the corner, sat their toilet, Jason. On its lid, almost insultingly casual, blinked the data chip. Severo allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. All their clever traps, all their psychological warfare, and they'd made the classic mistake of leaving their objective barely guarded. Arrogance. Thy name was human. He reached for the chip, fingers closing around. The toilet seat was spring-loaded. It snapped up with the force of divine judgment, catching Severo square in the face. The impact triggered a hidden reservoir that doused him in dye. Not the subtle green of before, but the eye-searing permanent safety cone orange that clashed horribly with his residual glow. Air horns blared, bells rang. A recorded voice that sounded suspiciously like Jack announced,
Congratulations! You've been Jason!
Severo, orange and stunned, held up the chip with the grim determination of someone whose dignity had died but whose mission lived on.
I have it! I have it! I have it!
He called to his allies below.
The chip is fake!
Riley said, emerging from the hidden compartment beneath the main floor. Did you really think we'd leave the real one sitting on a toilet? The fighting stopped. Everyone, human, Yatari, and the various assault teams, turned to stare. Riley reached up and pulled out her hair tie, revealing the actual data chip that had been braided into her messy bun the entire time.
You were all so focused on taking our fortress, you forgot the most important rule of human competition.
Which is? Capo asked, still glittering like a warrior who'd lost a fight with a craft store. We don't just bend the rules, Jack supplied helpfully. We origami them into little animals.
That's not cheating,
Missy corrected.
That's creative interpretation of the parameters.
The chip was supposed to be in your base,
Grit protested. It was, Riley said. I'm part of the base. I built it, I live in it, therefore I am it, philosophically speaking. The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected sound. Capo, laughing. It started as a chuckle, building into full-bodied laughter that shook glitter from his armor like festive dandruff. Fight without honor, he said when he could speak again. Tricks, traps, and biological waste. You turned our strengths against us and made us look like fools. He paused, then added with something that might have been respect. There is a lesson in that. Yeah, Severo muttered, still dripping orange and green like a traffic light that had given up. Never trust a toilet. The judges, who'd been watching with increasingly undignified excitement, officially called the end of the competition. Drones swarmed the area, broadcasting the final moments across the galaxy. Team Earth had won. They'd won through duct tape, determination, and a willingness to weaponize plumbing. In the vast cosmos, Earth's reputation was spreading. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. Never underestimate a species that considers "hold my beer" a battle cry and "what's the worst that could happen" a planning strategy. In the end, that might have been humanity's greatest victory of all.